The sweet fragrance of spring blossoms carried on the breeze through the imperial gardens of the Habsburg summer palace at Schönbrunn. Katherine Haywood paused beneath a flowering cherry tree, her gloved fingers tracing the rough bark as she fought to steady her breathing. Behind her, the grand palace stood like a golden sentinel, its hundreds of windows reflecting the afternoon sun, each one, to her, an unwelcome eye observing her every move. She had fled here seeking momentary respite from the suffocating constraints of court life, from the whispers that followed her through gilded corridors. The British ambassador's daughter, raised in India, educated in England, and now thrust into the Austro-Hungarian imperial court, was an oddity, neither fully belonging to the world she had left behind nor the one she now inhabited. The stone bench by the Neptune fountain is more comfortable than it appears, my lady. The voice startled her. Katherine turned to find a man kneeling beside a bed of tulips, gardening tools spread on a canvas cloth beside him. His hands were soil-stained, his attire simple but neat, the uniform of the palace groundskeepers. Unlike the footmen and courtiers who averted their gaze in her presence, his hazel eyes met hers directly, though respectfully. "I didn't see you there," she said, instinctively smoothing her periwinkle day dress. "Few people do, my lady." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "An advantage in my position." There was something in his voice, a refined quality that seemed at odds with his station. His German carried the faintest hint of an accent she couldn't place. "You're English," he observed, returning to his work, carefully loosening the soil around a struggling tulip. "Yes. Though I spent most of my childhood in India." Katherine took a step closer. "My father is Sir William Haywood, the new British ambassador." He nodded without looking up. "I heard his daughter caused quite a stir by declining Baron von Keller's dance at the Empress's reception." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. The Baron's hands tend to wander where they shouldn't. To her surprise, the groundskeeper laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to startle even him. He glanced up, an apologetic expression replacing his mirth. "Forgive me, my lady. That was inappropriate." "No," she said, finding herself smiling in return. "It's refreshing to hear laughter that isn't veiled in mockery." She gestured to the bench he had mentioned. "May I?" "The gardens belong to the Emperor, not to me," he replied. "But yes, it's a fine spot to gather one's thoughts." Katherine settled on the stone bench, arranging her skirts as she watched him work. "Do you have a name, gardener?" He hesitated before answering. "Henry, my lady. Henry Novak." "Well, Henry Novak, you seem to know a great deal about court gossip for someone who works with soil and seeds." His hands paused briefly over the flower bed. "Plants are far simpler than people, my lady, but one cannot help overhearing things in a palace." Something about his measured words suggested there was more to this groundskeeper than dirt beneath his fingernails. Katherine found herself intrigued despite the voice of propriety in her head cautioning against extended conversation with a servant. "Will you be at the midsummer ball, Mr. Novak? Perhaps tending to the floral arrangements?" A shadow passed over his face. "No, my lady. My duties keep me outdoors, among the living things." He gestured to the vast expanse of the formal gardens. "The palace interior is not a place I frequent." Katherine sensed a story there but knew better than to pry. After years at her father's side during diplomatic functions, she had learned to recognize when doors were firmly closed. "Then I shall have to seek the gardens more often," she said, rising from the bench. "The company here seems preferable to what awaits inside." Henry stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Katherine felt an unexpected connection, like recognizing a fellow exile in a strange land. "The southern rose garden is particularly fine this time of year," he offered. "And rarely visited before noon." She understood his meaning immediately. "I'm fond of morning walks," Katherine replied. "Good day, Mr. Novak." As she made her way back to the palace, Katherine felt lighter than she had in weeks. The groundskeeper's quiet dignity and the subtle invitation in his words had sparked something she hadn't realized she'd been missing, the promise of genuine conversation uncomplicated by political machinations or social climbing. The southern rose garden became Catherine's sanctuary over the following weeks. She would slip away after breakfast, citing a desire for fresh air and exercise, and make her way to the secluded corner of the imperial grounds where Henry Novak could usually be found tending to the Empress's prized roses. Their conversations began tentatively, observing the careful distance their respective positions demanded. But gradually, as spring deepened into summer, the barriers between them softened. He spoke to her of botany and the silent language of flowers. She told him of the vibrant markets of Delhi and the misty moorlands of her family's English estate. "You miss India?" Henry observed one morning as he carefully pruned a climbing rose. Today he wore a worn straw hat to shield himself from the strengthening June sun. Catherine traced her fingertips over a velvet red bloom. "I miss its contradictions. The chaos and the serenity. Here, everything feels." She searched for the right word. "Prescribed." "The weight of empire requires rigid structures," Henry replied, his tone suggesting personal knowledge of such burdens. "Though I imagine the British Raj has its own suffocating hierarchies." "Indeed. My father's position meant we straddled worlds without belonging to either." Catherine sighed. The daughter of a colonial administrator is never quite English enough for England, yet forever separate from the land beneath her feet. Henry nodded, understanding evident in his eyes. "Belonging is a luxury few are granted." "And what of you, Mr. Novak?" Catherine ventured, emboldened by their growing familiarity. "You speak like a man who has known other lives than that of a palace gardener." His hand stilled on the roses, and for a moment, Catherine feared she had overstepped. Then Henry straightened, removing his gloves as he faced her. "I studied botany and natural philosophy at the University of Prague," he said quietly. "Before certain political activities made continuing my academic career impossible." Catherine's eyes widened slightly. "You were involved in the nationalist movements." "I believed in a different future for Bohemia." His voice carried no apology, though he kept it low. "The Habsburg Empire has many virtues, but equal treatment of its Slavic peoples has never been among them." The revelation transformed him in Catherine's eyes, not diminishing him, but adding layers to the man she had come to look forward to seeing each day. A scholar, a political idealist, now tending imperial gardens with the same care he might once have given to revolutionary ideals. "How did you come to be here?" she asked. Henry's smile held a touch of irony. "An influential professor intervened before I could be imprisoned. Instead of a cell, I was given a hoe and trowel, kept where I could be watched but far from academic circles where dangerous ideas might spread." He gestured to the palace looming in the distance. "My jailers don't realize that gardens are the perfect classrooms for contemplating natural liberty." Catherine felt a new respect bloom alongside the affection that had been quietly growing within her. "And yet you risk speaking openly with the daughter of a British diplomat." "Perhaps I recognize a fellow exile," he said softly. "Or perhaps I've grown weary of silence." Their morning conversations became the axis around which Catherine's days revolved. The tedious diplomatic functions and stifling court etiquette became bearable knowing that come morning, she could escape to the rose garden where Henry would be waiting, sometimes with a particularly interesting plant specimen to show her, other times with pointed observations about the botanical metaphors in the latest court poetry she'd mentioned. As July brought sweltering heat to Vienna, Catherine arrived at their meeting place one morning to find Henry unusually somber. Before she could inquire about his mood, he presented her with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I thought you might appreciate this," he said, his voice carrying an undercurrent of emotion she couldn't quite identify. Catherine unwrapped the parcel carefully to reveal a slim, leather-bound volume. Goethe's Botanical Writings, she read from the cover, running her fingers over the embossed lettering. In German. "You mentioned wanting to improve your scientific vocabulary," Henry explained. "The margins contain my translations and notes." He hesitated. "It's presumptuous, perhaps." "It's perfect," Catherine interrupted, clutching the book to her chest. No diamond necklace from an Austrian nobleman could have meant more. This was a gift of mind and heart, the sharing of knowledge and passion. That evening, tucked away in her chambers, Catherine opened the book and discovered more than botanical observations in Henry's precise handwriting. Between translations of Goethe's theories were Henry's own reflections, and increasingly, personal confessions addressed directly to her. I watch you approach each morning across the gravel path, and I am reminded of Goethe's observation that true beauty in nature is found not in perfection but in the harmonious integration of apparent contradictions. You carry yourself with aristocratic grace yet speak with refreshing directness, you honor convention while quietly defying expectation. Catherine's heart quickened as she turned the pages, finding more intimate revelations with each marginal note. Today you spoke of feeling trapped between worlds. I understand this exile of the spirit all too well. Yet in your presence, I find myself forgetting the boundaries that separate us, not just of class or nationality, but of fate itself. Is it foolish to imagine a different future than the one prescribed to us? The final note, written on the blank page at the end of the book, was the most direct. The Empress has scheduled the annual renewal of the Eastern Formal Garden. I will be reassigned there for at least 3 weeks beginning Monday next. 3 weeks without our conversations feels an eternity, yet I dare not suggest alternative meeting places that might compromise your reputation. If you wish to continue our discussions, perhaps you might leave a note beneath the third stone bench in the southern rose garden, and I will find a way to reply. Catherine sat with the book open on her lap until dawn began to lighten the sky. The intensity of her feelings for the groundskeeper could no longer be denied, yet the impossibility of any proper future between them was equally undeniable. Her father would be horrified. A political exile turned gardener was hardly a suitable match for an ambassador's daughter. The scandal would end Sir William's diplomatic career. Yet the thought of not seeing Henry, of letting their connection fade without acknowledgement, was unbearable. The next morning, Catherine arrived at the rose garden earlier than usual, her heart pounding as she approached their usual meeting place. Henry was already there, kneeling beside a rose bush, but he rose immediately upon seeing her. "You read it," he said simply, searching her expression. Catherine nodded, clutching the book in her hands. "Every word. I overstepped. Forgive me." The formal tone he had abandoned weeks ago returned like armor. "No," Catherine said firmly. "You gave words to what I felt but feared to express." She took a step closer. "I will leave notes, not just for 3 weeks, but for as long as necessary." Relief and something deeper transformed Henry's features. "Catherine. Lady Catherine. There you are." They both turned to see one of her father's aides approaching rapidly along the path. Catherine instinctively stepped back from Henry, who immediately knelt again beside the roses, becoming once more the invisible gardener. "Your father has been looking everywhere for you," the young man said, slightly out of breath. "Prince Maximilian has requested your company for the afternoon ride to Laxenburg Castle." "It's a great honor," the Archduke himself suggested the invitation. Catherine felt the weight of imperial politics descend upon her shoulders once more. "Of course. Please inform my father I'll return to prepare immediately." As the aide departed, she risked one final glance at Henry. "Third stone bench," she whispered. "Tomorrow." Their correspondence began that day, Catherine slipping small notes beneath the designated bench, Henry retrieving them and leaving his replies in the same location. Simple observations at first, then deeper confidences as the weeks passed. Through these written conversations, Catherine learned of Henry's childhood in a small Bohemian village, his brilliant academic career, and the passionate belief in Czech independence that had cost him his future. In return, she shared her sense of displacement in proper English society after years in India, her frustration with the diplomatic world's casual dismissal of her intellect, and her growing disillusionment with the marriage prospects being arranged by her well-meaning father. Prince Maximilian has made his intentions clear. She wrote in late August. Father is ecstatic. A connection to the Habsburg line, even through a minor prince, would secure his diplomatic legacy. The prince is not unkind, merely uninterested in anything beyond hunting and opera. He speaks to my shoulder rather than my face and has yet to ask a single question about my thoughts on any matter. I am to give him my answer after the imperial hunt next week. Henry's reply came the following day, his usually neat handwriting showing signs of agitation. I have no right to speak on such matters. A gardener does not counsel an ambassador's daughter on marriage proposals from princes. Yet I cannot bear the thought of your spirit being slowly extinguished in a union of convenience. You deserve a partner who recognizes the extraordinary person you are, your intelligence, your compassion, your quiet courage. If the prince cannot see these qualities, he does not deserve your hand. I know what I write is selfish. I have nothing to offer but my heart and mind. But know this, whatever you decide, you have transformed my existence. Before you, I tended these gardens mechanically, finding beauty in plants but little joy in life itself. You have brought color back to a world I had resigned myself to seeing in shades of grey. Catherine read his words until she had memorized every line, torn between heartache and a wild, impossible hope. That night, she made her decision. The annual imperial hunt was a grandiose affair, with the nobility displaying their finest riding attire and horsemanship. Catherine rode side by side with Prince Maximilian through the wooded grounds of Laenzer Tiergarten, maintaining the expected pleasant conversation while her mind remained fixed on the letter concealed in her riding habit, her response to both the prince and Henry. As they approached a stream, Catherine deliberately slowed her mount, allowing the hunting party to advance ahead. "I believe my horse has picked up a stone," she called to her lady's companion. "Please inform the prince I shall rejoin shortly." Once alone, Catherine quickly withdrew the sealed letter from her pocket and placed it beneath a distinctive fallen log she had noticed on their outward journey. Henry would know to look here, she had described the location precisely in her previous note. What she hadn't anticipated was the sudden summer storm that broke over the hunting grounds less than an hour later. The imperial party returned to the palace drenched and in disarray, the hunt abandoned. Catherine spent an agonizing night wondering if her letter would survive the deluge, and if Henry would risk venturing to such a distant part of the imperial grounds to retrieve it. 2 days passed without response. On the third morning, Catherine was summoned to her father's private study, where she found him pacing before the window, his face grave. "Prince Maximilian has withdrawn his suit," Sir William announced without preamble. Rather abruptly and without explanation. Catherine maintained a composed expression despite her racing heart. "I'm sorry to have disappointed you, father." Sir William studied his daughter closely. "I wonder if his decision might have been influenced by certain information that has come to my attention." He picked up a folded paper from his desk. "A letter was intercepted yesterday, addressed to you in a hand not befitting court correspondence." The blood drained from Catherine's face as she recognized Henry's handwriting on the envelope. "Imagine my concern to discover that my daughter has been engaging in secret communications with a gardener, and not just any gardener, but a known Czech nationalist who was very nearly imprisoned for sedition against the empire. Father, I can explain. Can you explain risking not only your reputation but potentially my position and Britain's diplomatic relations with Austria-Hungary?" His voice remained controlled, but Catherine could see the genuine fear behind his anger. "Do you understand what might have happened if this letter had been intercepted by someone other than our own staff?" Catherine straightened her shoulders. "Henry Novak is a scholar and a man of principle. Our friendship has been entirely proper." "Friendship?" Sir William's eyebrows rose. "Catherine, I read the letter." Shame and indignation warred within her. "You had no right, I had every right as your father and as Her Majesty's representative to ensure no harm came to either you or British interests." He sighed, his expression softening slightly. "The man writes with the passion and eloquence of the educated man he claims to be, I grant you that. But surely you see the impossibility of this situation." Catherine remained silent, her mind racing through possible arguments, potential paths forward. Sir William continued more gently, "We are departing for London within the fortnight. Lord Palmerston has requested my consultation on the growing tensions in the Ottoman territories. It's an opportunity for a fresh start, away from complications." "And if I refuse to leave?" Catherine asked quietly. "Then you risk destroying this man's precarious position here. One word from the British ambassador suggesting inappropriate attention toward his daughter, and your Mr. Novak would find himself facing far worse than exile to the imperial gardens." Sir William's expression was sympathetic but resolute. "Sometimes, Catherine, the kindest choice is the hardest one. That night, Katherine penned the most difficult letter of her life, explaining her imminent departure and the danger Henry would face if they continued their correspondence. She begged him to understand that her father's warning was not idle. The delicate political balance of the empire meant that Czech nationalists remained under close scrutiny, and any excuse to remove potential troublemakers would be seized upon. I cannot bear to be the cause of further hardship in your life, she wrote, tears blurring her vision. Please know that these months in the gardens with you have been the happiest of my life. You have shown me what true companionship of mind and spirit can be. Whatever the future holds, I shall carry that knowledge with me always. She left the letter in their usual hiding place the next morning, her heart breaking with each step that carried her away from the southern rose garden. The fortnight before their departure passed in a blur of farewell receptions and packing. Katherine moved through the required social engagements like an automaton, speaking when spoken to, smiling when appropriate, while her thoughts remained fixed on the gardens and the man she would never see again. On the eve of their departure, as Katherine supervised the last of her trunks being closed and sealed, her lady's maid approached with a small package. "This was delivered for you, my lady," the young woman said hesitantly. "The messenger was most insistent it reach you before tomorrow's journey." Katherine's hands trembled as she accepted the package, immediately recognizing the careful wrapping. She dismissed the maid with a murmured thanks and retreated to her window seat, where the last light of day illuminated a beautifully preserved rose and a folded paper. The rose was unlike any she had seen in the imperial gardens, a deep, burnished gold with edges that blushed crimson. Beneath it lay not a letter but a carefully drawn botanical illustration with detailed notes in Henry's precise hand. It depicted the very rose she held, labeled Rosa o Katherine Haywood, a new hybrid. At the bottom of the page, a simple note read, cultivated through patience and perseverance. Like true understanding between souls, it will bloom in any soil, withstand separation, and grow stronger through adversity. Some creations cannot be constrained by imperial borders. Katherine pressed the illustration to her heart, understanding the message beneath the botanical description. He had heard her warning and accepted the necessity of their separation, but he was also telling her that what they had created together would endure, regardless of distance. She carefully pressed the golden rose between the pages of Goethe's botanical writings, alongside Henry's intimate notes, and placed both in her personal travel case rather than her ship trunks. Whatever the future held in London, she would carry this piece of the garden, and of him, close to her heart. London's grey skies and persistent drizzle matched Katherine's mood as autumn deepened into winter. She moved through the expected social rounds of the season with dutiful precision but little enthusiasm. Sir William, noting his daughter's melancholy, encouraged her participation in intellectual gatherings rather than just the usual balls and musicales, hoping to rekindle her spirits through engagement with ideas. It was at one such gathering, a lecture on botanical innovations at the Royal Horticultural Society, that Katherine found herself suddenly alert, her attention captured by the speaker's mention of new rose hybridization techniques being developed in Bohemia. "The work coming from Prague University's botanical department is particularly promising," the distinguished botanist explained. "We are fortunate to have received advance notice of their findings through correspondence with Professor Janek, who will be visiting London this spring to collaborate with Kew Gardens on several promising specimens." Katherine barely heard the remainder of the lecture, her mind racing with possibilities. Could there be a connection to Henry through this professor? Would it be possible to send a message without risking exposure? When the lecture concluded, Katherine gathered her courage and approached the speaker, introducing herself as the daughter of Sir William Haywood with a particular interest in Central European botanical developments. "I spent time in Vienna recently," she explained, "and developed a fascination with the imperial gardens. Might I inquire if Professor Janek's visit will include any presentations open to interested amateurs such as myself?" The botanist seemed delighted by her interest. "Indeed, Lady Katherine. The professor will be giving 3 public lectures during his stay. I would be happy to ensure you receive details of these events." "That would be most kind," Katherine replied, her heart beating rapidly. "And forgive my presumption, but would the professor welcome correspondence from enthusiasts prior to his arrival? I have some questions about Bohemian rose varieties that I've been unable to resolve through my limited library." I'm certain he would be honored to hear from Sir William Haywood's daughter, the botanist assured her with a slight bow. I shall provide his direction along with the lecture schedule. That night, Katherine drafted and redrafted a carefully worded letter to Professor Janek, expressing her interest in Bohemian botanical innovations, particularly rose hybridization. She made specific reference to a golden rose with crimson edges she had observed in Vienna, wondering if the professor might be familiar with this variety and its developer. The weeks waiting for a response tested Katherine's patience severely. She threw herself into study of Czech language and culture, obtaining whatever books she could find on Bohemia's history and natural sciences. If opportunity arose, she would be prepared. When the professor's response finally arrived in February, Katherine's hands shook so badly she could barely break the seal. The letter was formal and scholarly, discussing several rose varieties being developed at Prague University. In the final paragraph, almost as an afterthought, Professor Janek wrote, regarding the gold-crimson hybrid you described, I believe you may be referring to a remarkable new variety developed by one of my former students, an exceptionally gifted botanist named Henry Novak. While political circumstances unfortunately curtailed his academic career, I have maintained correspondence with him regarding his continuing work. The rose in question, which he has named Katherine, represents a significant achievement in combining hardiness with beauty. Mr. Novak continues his research privately while fulfilling other obligations. If you have particular interest in this specimen, I shall be bringing detailed documentation of its development when I visit London in April. Katherine pressed the letter to her lips, tears of joy blurring her vision. Henry had found a way to communicate, using his botanical work as the bridge. And more importantly, he had continued to develop their rose, their shared creation, despite everything. The arrival of Professor Janek in London became the fixed star by which Katherine oriented her days. She attended each of his 3 public lectures, positioning herself where she could be observed without drawing undue attention. At the second lecture, the professor acknowledged her presence directly, mentioning Lady Katherine Haywood's informed questions about Bohemian rose hybridization and inviting further discussion at the reception following his final presentation. When that evening finally arrived, Katherine approached the professor with careful composure, though her heart threatened to burst from her chest. Your lectures have been most illuminating, Professor, she said after exchanging proper pleasantries. I'm particularly intrigued by the practical applications of hybridization techniques in creating varieties that can thrive in different environments. The elderly professor's eyes twinkled with understanding. Indeed, Lady Katherine. Adaptation to new environments is a fascinating aspect of botanical science. He glanced around before continuing in a lower voice, I have brought the detailed documentation of this Katherine rose I mentioned in my letter. Perhaps you might call at Kew tomorrow morning? I have a private research room there where we could discuss the technical aspects without boring the general company. I would be delighted, Katherine replied, struggling to maintain her calm demeanor. The following morning found Katherine arriving at the Royal Botanic Gardens precisely at the appointed hour. A young assistant escorted her to a small research room overlooking the sprawling gardens, where Professor Janek was arranging papers on a large table. Ah, Lady Katherine, excellent timing, the professor greeted her cheerfully. I have just received word that my research assistant has arrived with additional specimens. He should join us momentarily. Katherine barely had time to process the professor's words before the door opened again. Her heart stopped, then raced forward as Henry Novak stepped into the room, carrying a wooden case marked with botanical labels. He looked different, his clothes were those of an academic rather than a gardener, his posture more confident. But his eyes, when they met hers, held the same warmth she had treasured in the Imperial Gardens. Lady Haywood, he said formally, though his voice carried a tremor of emotion. Professor Janek has spoken highly of your interest in Bohemian botanical research. Professor Janek cleared his throat. I find I must consult with the director about our afternoon presentation. Perhaps you could explain your hybridization techniques to Lady Katherine in my absence, Mr. Novak? I shall return in, perhaps an hour. The moment the door closed behind the professor, Katherine and Henry stood frozen, separated by the width of the table and the months of absence, yet connected by a current of feeling that made the air between them vibrate with intensity. You're here. Katherine whispered. How is this possible? Henry set down the wooden case carefully. Professor Janek never abandoned me, even after my political troubles. When he received your letter, he recognized your name immediately from my correspondence. His voice softened. From the rose I created for you. But your position in Vienna, I thought you couldn't leave. After you departed, there seemed little reason to stay. A shadow crossed his features. And certain political developments made my position increasingly precarious. The professor arranged for me to continue my research under his supervision at Prague University and then to accompany him to England. He hesitated. I didn't know if you would want to see me again, or if your circumstances might have changed. Katherine moved around the table, closing the distance between them. Nothing has changed, she said firmly. Except that I've learned Czech history and botanical Latin in hopes of understanding your world better. Henry's expression transformed with wonder. You studied Czech. Velmi pattern, she admitted with a small laugh. Very badly. But I'm improving. He took her hand then, his touch sending warmth cascading through her. Katherine, I have no right to ask anything of you. My situation has improved, the British scientific community has shown interest in my hybridization techniques, but I remain a Czech botanist with a complicated political history. And I remain a woman who found her true self in a garden, talking to a man who saw beyond titles and conventions to the person beneath. Katherine squeezed his hand. Tell me about our rose. Henry's face lit with passion as he opened the wooden case, revealing a small potted plant bearing a single golden crimson bloom. It combines the hardness of wild roses with the beauty of cultivated varieties. It can survive frost and drought, adapt to different soils. His voice grew softer. Like you, it finds a way to thrive wherever it's planted, without losing its essential nature. Katherine touched the velvet petals gently. And like you, it carries both strength and beauty in equal measure. She looked up to meet his gaze directly. What happens now, Henry? Professor Janek has recommended me for a research position at Kew Gardens, he replied, hope evident in his voice. If accepted, I would have permanent residency in England, a modest but respectable income, and opportunities to continue my work. He drew a deep breath. It would also mean I could court you properly, with your father's knowledge, as a man with a future to offer rather than merely a past to hide. Katherine's heart soared. My father may still object, he already knows, Henry interrupted gently. Professor Janek approached him formally last week, explaining my academic credentials and current position. Sir William was understandably cautious, but agreed to consider the matter, particularly given the support of the Royal Horticultural Society. Tears of joy filled Katherine's eyes. You've thought of everything. I've had months to plan this moment, Henry admitted, raising her hand to his lips. To imagine standing before you again, no longer separated by imperial politics or the boundaries of class. There will still be obstacles, Katherine cautioned, though she couldn't suppress her smile. Society may not easily accept, society can admire our rose while we build our garden, Henry replied with newfound confidence. Together. As spring blossomed across London, a small but distinguished gathering assembled in the Temperate House at Kew Gardens to witness the official unveiling of Rosa o Katherine Haywood, a new hybrid officially registered with the Royal Horticultural Society. Sir William Haywood stood proudly beside his daughter as Henry Novak, newly appointed research botanist, presented the first fully developed specimen to the assembled scientific community. This rose represents not only a botanical achievement, Henry explained to appreciative murmurs, but a bridge between nations and traditions. Like the best of human connections, it draws strength from diverse origins to create something entirely new, something that can withstand separation and adversity while maintaining its essential beauty. As applause filled the glass-domed space, Katherine caught Henry's eye across the room. In that moment, surrounded by the living green world he had helped cultivate, she saw their future unfurling like one of his carefully tended plants, rooted in the rich soil of their shared past, reaching steadily toward the light.